Where else would you rather be? I'm Paul Clifford, CEO of the Penn State Alumni Association. Welcome to the people of Penn State. Each week on the podcast, you can expect to hear the voices of Penn Staters talking about what they're passionate about, and you can expect to feel the pride and the power of the Penn State Network. The People of Penn State podcast can be found on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. Go ahead, subscribe, and give us a rating. Ratings and reviews help other Penn Staters find these great stories. And we have another one to pass on today. We're actually turning the tables on Hannah Mears. She is a sports broadcaster and producer located in Pittsburgh. She graduated from Penn State in 2020 and currently works as an on-air host for the Pirates. She is a sports producer for KDKA-TV, a betting host for Picks and Parlays, and does freelance sideline reporting for the Big Ten Network. Hannah, welcome to the people of Penn State.
Paul, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. Always good to connect with some Penn Staters and kind of fun being on this side of it for once.
Well, and it's fun to virtually welcome you back to Happy Valley. I know your heart is always here, even though you can't be here as often as you'd like. Let's start at the beginning. How did you become a Penn State Nittany Lion?
I have like an interesting story, I would say, because most people, I feel like a lot of the times have a ton of family members who went there, have a lot of Penn State legacy. For me, I was just sort of a kid that had no idea what I really wanted to do. I always thought I wanted to go to school and go to college and continue my soccer career in college and go into the medical field. That's sort of been my game plan from a young age. Something just didn't feel right, though. I was going to go play Division III soccer. I was going to go become a nurse practitioner, but I had something just missing inside of me. And I think my mom saw that more than anything. I was just very uninterested in finding a roommate, learning more about the program, figuring out my life essentially. And I had not applied to any other schools at this time. And my mom just encouraged me to apply to another school. So I sort of had brushed it off. And then my cousin Emily and my uncle Simon decided that it'd be best that I go and see a Penn State football game and what Penn State was like, because they were big Penn State fans. Right. So I went with them and I saw a big tailgate and what a Penn State tailgate was like and what a football game was like. And something about just being on that campus screamed like, oh, this is me. Like something about this means I'm supposed to be here. That night I went home, I filled out the application to Penn State myself, didn't say anything to my parents, just filled it out myself, paid the application fee myself, and was like, yep, this is exactly where I think I'm going to go. But I still had to get accepted. So I went and told my parents that's where I applied. Now, my dad wrestled and played football at Lock Haven when he went to college. And at that time, Lock Haven and Penn State were huge rivals in the wrestling sphere. So that was probably the only college growing up my dad said I couldn't go to because he just hated everything about Penn State. And so that ended up being really funny. Long story short, I ended up getting accepted. My mom couldn't wait to bring the acceptance letter. Now, it was like big, so I feel like you could kind of guess I got accepted. She brought it to my high school, pulled me out of class to open it, and was so excited for me. And from that point on, I just knew this is where I wanted to go. So it was really, really hard for me as somebody who grew up competitively playing a lot of sports, but focused mainly on soccer, to give up the sport, but I knew bigger things were ahead. And then I ended up driving myself to the pre-orientation that Penn State does for students, which is so wonderful. They give a lot of their freshmen, their incoming class, an opportunity to sit through a bunch of lectures and just figure out what career path is out there and what majors they have available. When I sat through the communications lecture, I was like, oh, this is where I'm meant to be. This is the perfect mix of everything I love. I always loved my reading and writing classes. I loved public speaking. I always had a little bit of a personality. And then on top of that, I loved sports. So I really had never known how to major in that or how that could come to be, because I feel like growing up, I only ever thought of myself in the medical field or working with kids. Those are some of the things I was passionate about. So once I found that, though, I was like, oh, 100%. And then as soon as I stepped on Penn State's campus, my first day of freshman year, I knew that's exactly where I should be. So things worked out for the best, but it was a little bit of an unorthodox way of getting to college for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of an amazing story. I mean, you were on one path, and in the course of a 3-hour football game at Penn State, your whole life trajectory was flipped. Different school, different major, different focus. When you came to Penn State, and we're going to get into the broadcasting stuff in a minute, but when you came to Penn State, what are some of the things that you were involved in? Did you try to get involved with club soccer and some of that, those other things that you were interested in high school? How did you get involved as a student?
Yeah, so my deal with my dad, actually, this is funny. Now, my dad is definitely more on board with Penn State now after everything that I accomplished there. And he, always wears all his wrestlers. My dad's a high school wrestling coach, and all his wrestlers laugh at him all the time, saying he wears the same, like, "We Are Penn State" shirt, like, every other day. And it had my class of 2020 on the back, the shirt that you get, like, the first day freshman year. And my dad sports it all the time. Him and my mom wear them. So my dad's pride has grown, I will say that. But my deal with my dad going to Penn State, because they had, and my parents, I was very fortunate and blessed that I grew up with parents who were able to invest a lot into the sport of soccer for me. And I was able to do everything that I had wanted to do with that sport. But my dad was not happy with the fact that I was turning down a scholarship to go play somewhere. So his deal was I had to walk on to the Penn State soccer team if I accepted this. So I was like, yeah, of course, absolutely. But once I got onto campus and started realizing all of the opportunities that I could have elsewhere doing other things, it sort of went to the back burner. And I think my dad was very okay with that once he started seeing everything that I was able to get involved in with broadcast and everything I was able to do because I wasn't playing a sport. So all of that free time that I did have to invest into my career. But I was going to play club soccer, didn't end up doing that. Played club handball for a little bit, which was super fun. But that ended up just having like odd times of practices and stuff that weren't really lining up with, if I had to cover a game for Big Ten Network Student Union, I was going to go broadcast that instead of playing club handball. And then I played a lot of intramural sports. I was an intramural flag football champion, not to brag. I also played IM soccer, which was super fun. We won the indoor championship doing that as well, which was really fun. I played intramural basketball for a while. So all of those sports that are available intramurally were super fun at Penn State. Like, they're really competitive. Everyone has a blast, but also not as serious as what everything else had to be. And if you had to, have something come up with your career, you didn't necessarily have to go. I was involved in a lot of other things, though. Penn State has so many opportunities out there for students. I was involved in the John Curley Center for Sports Journalism. So there were a lot of different events you could always go to for females and males alike who wanted to be in sports broadcasting and communications. I was involved in just about everything you could think of for that. I was involved in Christian athletes. I loved going to Penn State's Christian athletes nights and got to sit with people and pray and just be a part of that group was really, really cool and special to me. I was a part of the wrestling affiliate club. So we did a lot of marketing and promotional work for the wrestling team for all of their matches. I was working a bunch of jobs at this time. I was babysitting, sideline reporting. I was working at a tanning salon, occasionally waitressing. I sort of a little bit of everything while being involved in all of these clubs, but I wouldn't trade a single second of it because the best thing that Penn State taught me was to get out of my bubble. And there were a lot of times being a student who was working full time, essentially, is what I was doing, where you felt really isolated and felt like you were the only person on campus that had to give up a ton of your social life to be working and pursuing your career. And by my junior year, when I really started to meet new people and expand my bubble, I realized how many people on campus were doing triple of what I was. Our student government association is incredible. Every student that's involved in student government is really making significant changes behind the scenes. Every person in Panhellenic councils, people that are involved in Thon, insane amount of work being put and efforts and volunteering being put out by our Penn State students. So it made me feel like I had more of a community the more that I branched out and found other people to talk to and relate with. So I would say I was involved in a lot at Penn State, but it brought me to some of the most incredible people. And now I have a really cool network association as well. And I also did Thon. So people doing Thon, 46 Live, shout out to them. They do an incredible job. And it's been fun watching that broadcast grow as well.
That's amazing. So, your dad's dream for you might have been to make your mark on the pitch or on the court.
Yeah.
And where you actually made your mark was maybe just 3 feet to the side of that, right? And the sideline reporting. And as I recall, just being a fan of Penn State sports, for your junior and senior year, you were essentially the face of Penn State athletics during timeouts. Let's go to Hannah Mears on the court side or down on the sidelines. Talk about some of those opportunities that you had here at Penn State and how they propelled you to do what you're doing today.
Oh yeah, those opportunities were everything. So starting my freshman year, I remember taking Mike Portman's class, which is my favorite class I've probably ever taken at Penn State still. Mike Portman is such an influential person in my life. He's done so much to still help me, and it's really fun to still connect with him. He's an amazing professor on that campus. I had expressed to him my freshman year taking his class what I wanted to do, who I was, and if he had any connections to ever let me know. One day, and he's going to hate me for name dropping him in this, so that's fine. He can yell at me for that. He sent me an email saying there was a lady at the time. Her name was Ariel Sargent. She's since been married, but she at the time was the sideline reporter for all of Penn State athletics. And she was looking to start something called Beaver Stadium Extra. And they needed somebody to do interviews and sideline those sporting events where you're capturing everything around the sporting event, sort of outside of the sport itself. So at football games, you're capturing the people that are coming back, whether that's NFL athletes, famous alumni, anything happening in-game recognition wise. I was doing the interviews for that and we were putting it out. However, when I went to go to this interview with Ariel, I thought she was just looking for an intern. So I thought I was just going to be writing for her. Quite frankly, I was willing to do whatever she wanted me to do. And then I realized I was sitting through an interview to be on camera, having had zero on camera presence before. I had never been on camera before. And they ended up putting me through like a tryout essentially. And Jim Nachman, who I admire till this day, he's like a father figure to me. And he was my boss at Penn State. He told me they were going to throw me into the fire and I was sink or swim. So I ended up being on the sidelines during a blue-white game freshman year. Well, I guess it would have been the start of my sophomore year, essentially. And it was sink or swim. It was, if you can do this, we'll keep you. If you can't, we'll let you go. And thankfully they kept me, which was exciting. But it grew from there, essentially. So once they gained more trust in me, I learned more of a skill set. It transitioned into covering more sports and going to the basketball scene as well and taking Beaver Stadium Extra elsewhere. And then I also got experience in arena hosting, doing all of wrestling and basketball, which was really fun. And then I also did video production side of things and video and editing. And I stayed one whole summer, and Penn State allowed me this opportunity. I had expressed to their video department that I wanted to learn how to shoot as well. So I was more of a tool, an asset, besides just being on camera. And then because I stayed that summer, that fall in 2019, I actually ended up getting to go cover the 2019 NFL Combine. And I was by myself. It was terrifying. I had never flown before. So I flew there by myself, had to cover like 7 Penn State athletes by myself at the NFL Combine, shooting, editing, getting social content, being on camera, anything you can think of while navigating the entirety of what the 2019 NFL Combine, what the NFL Combine in general is. So then from there, got to end up covering the Super Bowl as like one last hurrah before COVID, took us all out of school. But I have had the most amazing experiences at Penn State, and I'm forever thankful to have come out with a solid reel to propose to people, to showcase what I can do, and was able to sort of start a leg up maybe in this industry than what some people graduating get to do.
This is the People of Penn State podcast. I'm Paul Clifford. I'm joined today by Hannah Mears. She's a sports broadcaster and producer. So Hannah, your class of 2020, Penn State. Talk a little bit about, as I've watched you since you've left Penn State, the word that continually comes to mind is hustle, right? I've seen you make your own opportunities. I've seen you kind of go into the pandemic, and where other people were struggling, especially in your industry, you were finding ways to thrive. Talk a little bit about how you approached kind of COVID and launching your career and getting it off to such a fantastic start with all of the obstacles that were in your way.
Well, thank you, first and foremost. I'm glad you guys have all seen it that way. You don't see the nights that I'm in my room like sobbing my eyes out because things were hard. But essentially, no job is ever too small, right? Especially when you're hit with a circumstance like COVID was. In 2020, upon graduation, you think you're going to have all of these opportunities, and then COVID shuts everything down. I emailed probably 50 to 60 people, and I'm not even kidding, probably obnoxious of me, but I would email random people I would Google about whether it was a team I was interested in working for, an organization, somewhere in athletics, and I would pitch myself to them in an email. And I was like, the worst thing they can say is no. So I would just do that over and over and over again. And of course, a lot of the responses were, we're on a hiring freeze. We're on a hiring freeze because of the pandemic, but thank you for reaching out. We'll keep you in mind if anything happens. So I'll save that one for later in this story of where my journey was, because that comes back to give me an opportunity eventually. But it was really hard at first because I had to go back once COVID started, things started opening up again. I was waitressing at the Arnold Palmer Country Club for a while, just trying to make money. And then while I was still finishing classes, and then I was student teaching. Essentially, they needed COVID emergency substitutes in elementary schools because you had to have bodies in classrooms for these kids. So all you had to have was a degree essentially, and they would hire you in. So I was working at an elementary school teaching, and then Friday night football games, I had an interesting and unique and unfortunate opportunity that we have a streaming service called Westmoreland Sports Network here in the Pittsburgh area. And they were much more needed essentially because people couldn't go to games. So fortunately, in my first year outside of college, I actually had relevant sideline reporting experience with Westmoreland Sports Network because they were still streaming events. So I was actually fortunate enough to be on the sidelines, but it was very hard and it taught me a lot. And I'm glad that that's where I started, because you can just Google anything about college athletics. With high school, you have to call coaches, you have to DM kids on Instagram to get information before a game, ask people for interviews. And that ended up making me so much more comfortable and more prepared and ready to be on the sidelines at a higher level. So fortunately, Westmoreland Sports Network gave me my start essentially into physically being on the sidelines, reporting on a game. Then I was able to let go of the teaching job and move more into doubling down on the sports industry because I sent all those emails, someone who is a Penn State graduate from the Major League Baseball Network reached out and offered me a job being a broadcast associate, working from home, just editing video for the Major League Baseball Network, which was super cool. So one of those 60 emails panned out. If that says anything to anyone, send the email. And then I was still working with Westmoreland Sports, but then slowly the Steelers reached out and I was doing all of their youth football coverage. Then I got to cover the combine for the Steelers as things were opening up. Then I had interned with the Pittsburgh Penguins in 2019, and they needed more people then once the pandemic started coming to a close. So I ended up working part-time with the Penguins for 3 years. And I was with the Steelers still. I still do freelance work for them. And then things really started to open up more. KDKA-TV, I was able to leave the MLB network, be at KDKA-TV in Pittsburgh. Now I took like a pay cut to be there, but it felt like a necessary foot in the door to leave MLB, come to KDKA and be in Pittsburgh and be all based in Pittsburgh. And now fast forward, because of my Penn State network, I'm now working with the Big Ten network freelance. I work with the Pirates on air, which has been the most incredible experience. I'm so thankful for that organization. Still at KDKA-TV, and now do sports betting with Picks and Parlays, which is super fun as well, and something I can do at home and just another skill set to have. So it has been a journey though. And though everyone sees the results, you don't always see the steps and twists and turns along the way. And there were a lot of times financially it was really hard, emotionally it was hard, and you just have to keep putting your foot forward and taking every job that comes your way, and just be ready for when the moment comes, because if you work hard enough, it will come. Just make sure you're ready when that time does come.
We're talking with Hannah Mears. On the bottom of the screen, you can see all of her social media handles that are scrolling along there. Go ahead and give her a follow on those platforms. You will not regret that. Hannah, you've mentioned throughout the interview, Jim Nachman, Mike Poorman. I know you and PJ Mullen were close when you were here at Penn State. Talk about the role of mentors and, from an advice perspective, looking back at the 18-year-old version of Hannah Mears, right? what advice would you give her in terms of utilizing mentors to get to where you are?
Oh gosh, I mean, I think she could give me advice because I feel like I've been able to utilize them so much. But I feel like I probably would have gone back and told her to speak up a little bit more because there was a lot of times that I was really struggling as a student, just managing being an adult at the same time. However, I am very fortunate that though I wasn't bold enough sometimes to come forward, that those people were receptive enough of what I was going through to sit me down and have those conversations to make sure I was okay and make sure I was happy and make sure what I was doing was what I wanted to do. Jim was seriously a father figure, and he is somebody that I owe my entire life's work to. He had to have those conversations sometimes that I'm sure he didn't want to have about here's probably what we should wear on the sidelines. Here's what we should ask. Here's what we should do, what we shouldn't do. And I am so thankful that I knew those conversations aren't easy for anyone to have, especially with a young female, but he was somebody that was truly looking out for my best interest, and I am beyond thankful for him. He taught me sort of how to approach the social media sphere and what people were looking for and seeing so that I wasn't posting anything stupid that could get me in trouble. Even though, as an 18-year-old kid, I'm sure we all have things we wish we could take back, especially growing up in that social media world. Someone like Ariel was so integral in my growth, even though she wasn't there for a long period of time while I was there. Being with a woman in that atmosphere who just made me feel so accepted and what I was talking about was valid meant so much to me. Mike Poorman was willing to give me opportunity after opportunity as long as I was willing to work for it. And knowing how much he vouched for people and cared about people meant the world to me. John Affleck was somebody, Steve Krasik. I mean, my professors worked hand in hand with helping me get opportunities. Shannon Furman from NFL Film, somebody that I met in Mike Poorman's class. And she is somebody who has always been a fabulous mentor. She has really helped me even now through this industry. She's become even more of a friend now these days, but she's really helped me navigate the hardships of what things are. Sort of anytime I had an industry related question, I could go to her if I felt sketched out at all or whatever it might be. She's been somebody I could always call on for that. And just as a female to have that support has been so great. PJ Mullen was such an integral part in who I am today as well. He helped me with all of the in-arena hosting stuff. He always made sure I was marketing myself well. When I put out my Beers with Mears stuff, he was somebody to reach out and say, here's what I think you could do better, like in the most polite way possible. These are just people who always want to see you succeed. And so I think just looking back on it, making sure I knew who I could trust back then. And now looking on it now, I could name drop a million people that I feel have really helped solidify who I am today. But truly, every single one of those people has been from my Penn State network, and they've been fantastic and great mentors, but even better people just to have in your corner, because times do get hard in this industry. But if you put in the work and you respect people and you make their product look good as well and make them look good, they'll always be in your corner. So I could give a billion thanks to people, Paul, from Penn State. I really, really could.
So it's interesting. There's a couple crossovers there. So the reason Shannon Furman was in Mike Poorman's classroom is because Shannon was honored with our Alumni Achievement Award while you were a student here. And so part of winning that award means that we put them in classrooms. Now, I'm sure Shannon was probably in that classroom before and after that, but it's great. It's one of the hallmarks of that program to put high-achieving young alumni back in the classroom with our students so that they can draw on that experience and have someone to look up to. Go ahead.
It was really funny to add to that story, something that I'm sure the Alumni Association will like to hear. The reason I stayed after to meet Shannon, because I was obviously a bit starstruck. I had that class with Saquon Barkley, and he sat by me in that class, and he had known my passions about wanting to do broadcast. We had just been classmates and friends, and he told me, he said, I will wait with you, but you have to wait after class to meet her one-on-one and shake her hand. Like, she's somebody I really feel like you should meet. So I was like, okay, like, I'm a little freshman. I'm so nervous. I don't know anything. And so I always have to give Saquon a little thanks for that, because he was the reason I did have the courage to stay after and introduce myself to Shannon. And till this day, There's a picture of all of us in that class together. And it's just really funny to look back on and see where we all are now and from just sitting in that classroom together.
Oh yeah, and she's amazing. She's amazing. The other thing I wanted to mention, your comment about PJ Mullen. So PJ for me has helped me a lot with public speaking, being on stage at pep rallies and things like that. And he gives the best feedback or the best notes, right? Where you actually feel good about the criticism he's giving you. So
always. There is no one that does. There were few people I feel like that did their job at anywhere better than how PJ did his job and still is doing his job. He's fantastic. And I learned so much from him. And I also don't know if that man has ever slept still a day in his life. Right. He was on 24/7. So if you were ever tired, you weren't allowed to be tired in front of PJ because odds are he got 8 hours less sleep than you did.
Yeah. You know, I want to go back to something that you said about the conversations between you and Nacho about what you should wear on the sidelines and what you should say and shouldn't say, right? You now serve as a role model for other women here at Penn State who aspire to do what you're doing, just like Shannon Furman was possibly that for you. Talk about some of the things that you have had to kind of deal with and overcome that maybe your male counterparts don't have to deal with.
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, just as much as there is things that my male counterparts don't have to deal with, there's things that I think are an advantage to being a female in this industry for sure. So I always want to highlight that to make sure young females aren't shying away. There are so many things I feel like I can say and do as a female that come off more authentically than if a guy would say it. So I do feel I have an advantage sometimes in that way. Sometimes it's been easier for me to connect with a lot of my early careers with Westmoreland Sports. I was reporting on wrestling, and sometimes I was working with kids in junior high, but they let down their guard a lot more when they see a young female coming up to them than they do as like an adult male. So there definitely were times that being a female worked to my advantage, but there are a lot of times now, especially being in the sports betting sphere as well and putting all of that stuff out there and having a platform where you do get more eyes on your content, where people automatically are commenting on your appearance, and it is very frustrating. There was a lot of times in college where people would ask me what I was majoring in, and I said I was broadcast. I wanted to be a sports journalist. And before anybody would ever ask, and this isn't all people, but this was something that I got a lot from different men in the industry or out of the industry for that matter, was the first thing they would say was, well, you have the face for it. You have the looks. They did not ever ask me, well, what sport are you interested in? What knowledge do you have? What are you passionate about within the sports sphere? And that was something that I always got so frustrated by, because everybody would just talk about looks or appearance. And it's not about that, especially when you get into this industry and everybody has a cell phone now and can be a journalist and can be a reporter on their own. It takes a ton of hard work, and you can't fake your way through the industry. You have to know your stuff. I even got a comment a few weeks ago, even after all these years, somebody asking me with my sports betting, now, does somebody write all of that for you? Or does this stuff that you actually know about this? You actually know about the NBA? I was appalled. And this was somebody that's in the industry as well. And I was like, actually, nobody writes anything for me. This is stuff that I'm studying. I'm analyzing data and statistics. I'm following along. This is all my content. I will never want to put my face out there with what somebody else is writing, because that's not authentically who I am. If I can't do it, I won't take the job to do it. So I just think there's those little things. They're still just working on the credibility, no matter who you are and what you do. There's always seems to be this little bit lack of credibility when you are a female. And there's obviously always the looks comments and things like that, where I do feel like sometimes I have to tell people, hi, I'm Hannah and I have a boyfriend, which is also very frustrating. So right. I just think there's those little things that will start to disappear. Eventually things are getting better, and we have so many strong females supporting and being the front runners of that. And I hope that I'm helping pave the way for somebody to feel better. But, you know, at the end of the day, there's enough people that are confident in who I am, and I'm confident in who I am and what I can bring, that those comments mean less and less. But those are definitely some of the things that I have experienced for sure.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, right? We were talking off screen or off camera about the sports that you cover, right? And you certainly cover mainstream sports like football, baseball, basketball. But I think that there's a lot of street cred gained when you're able to talk about those sports, right? But then when you dive into wrestling, right, that's a whole other there's a whole other level that takes you to in terms of not just being a sports fan, but being like somebody who actually covers sports. I mean, wrestling is so niche and it's so technical. Um, I just think
Definitely.
that I would put lacrosse in that category.
Totally.
I'd put ice hockey in that category. It's just um, yeah, I mean, it really just shows that you're more than somebody who's interested in the broadcasting, that you're actually into the sport.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's half the battle, being willing to branch out and learn other sports because you're passionate about them. So I would definitely say that's half the battle a lot of the time. But if you have a niche too, a lot of the times in this area of broadcasting to make yourself stand out, like if you do have experience in wrestling or something like fencing or golf, and that's your niche area, that helps you stand out so much more too. So everyone always wants to cover the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, the MLB. But if you have those smaller areas too, those are really important building blocks to a foundation of who you are in this industry.
Excellent. So, I talked about your hustle, right? Tell us about Beers with Mears. How did that come about? And where can people find that? This is obviously your podcast that you have started. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so during COVID in 2020, I started something called Hear Them Out with Hannah Mears. That was a podcast I had started just to keep my skills fresh and keep my face out there. And that was really fun. And I got to have a lot of people on. I had every other Wednesday featuring a wrestler to help promote wrestling. It was like Wrestling Wednesday, which was cool. But then eventually, work actually started happening and more things. So I had to let that go. Now I work with Picks and Parlays. And so this is Beers with Mears presented by Picks and Parlays. Beers with Mears has been a passion project of mine for a while now. I wanted to allow people to see me in a different space where it was, oh, she is 26 years old now. She's not that 18-year-old girl on the Penn State sidelines. She is a normal human. She's allowed to grow and evolve. So it's less about the drinking aspect of it and more so about the casual conversation that I can have with somebody while also allowing myself to grow and be relaxed. And this is who I am. I'm the kind of girl, I was raised on 90 acres of farmland. I like to crack a beer by the bonfire, and that's like my ideal Friday or Saturday night. A country girl through and through. So this sort of allowed me to share some of my background and who I am and my personality, and while also getting to have really unique conversations with people about sports and sports betting or whatever they might want to talk about. So Beers with Mears is now live on YouTube and Spotify. YouTube, you can subscribe to Picks and Parlays to find all of that content. And then on Spotify, you'll see just Beers with Mears if you Google it. Or if you type it into Spotify, you'll see it there. So those are where you can find that. So turn on those notifications. You'll see some interesting people on there, as well as former Penn Staters, which is really fun, and trying to amp up a guest list and start to transition here into what maybe season 2 might be, maybe have some live shows. I'd love to talk more about current events and fun things in sports that are happening, a lot of sports betting as well eventually. So yeah, definitely tune in for that. But Beers with Mears is a super good time, and I've been having a ton of fun being able to bring people on for that.
So you mentioned a little earlier in the show the fact that you have a boyfriend, right? This is maybe a little bit of the elephant in the room here, so we should just go ahead and address it, right? You were, during your time here, the face of Penn State athletics in so many different ways, and yet your boyfriend is an Ohio State grad who is now on the coaching staff, the wrestling coaching staff at Pitt. I mean, really, what do you have to say for yourself there, Hannah?
Yeah, did I seem like a traitor? Maybe a little bit. No, we have always been like in love, I think, since high school. We went to high school together. We grew up really close friends, and I had always been one of his biggest fans, still with him at Ohio State. And honestly, what made that so much easier for me was he was so supportive in my passions and my career and what I was doing, because he was super passionate about what he was doing as well with wrestling. And actually really funny though, in 2020, before what ended up happening was the national wrestling tournament was canceled because of COVID. Luke, my boyfriend, was going in ranked number 1 at 141. I was being sent to cover Penn State wrestling at the national championships that year. So had it worked out where 1 and 2, Luke Pletcher and Nick Lee, wrestled in the finals, I would have been covering Nick Lee against my boyfriend. So if my boyfriend would have lost, I would have had to do an interview with Nick Lee, being so happy and excited. And I would have been for Nick. He's a great friend of mine and an amazing competitor. And Luke would not have expected it any other way. But the wrestling community is somewhere where I've always felt so safe. Those men and women in that space have always been very supportive of me. They're the first ones to always ask if I ever need anything or jump on board when I ask them something as well. So I think I was just very fortunate that he was in a space where it was accepted and everyone was friends. And a lot of the guys at Penn State had already known him. They have, wrestled on similar teams growing up in the club sphere. So it was funny, definitely. But yeah, Ohio State and Penn State. Yeah, we didn't really like each other too much, but it was fun. It was a good that it waited till senior year, so there wasn't too much of a crossover there.
That's funny. Yeah, you're obviously talking about Luke Pletcher, one of the all-time greats at Ohio State. Now doing some really fantastic work with Keith Gavin down at Pitt to build that program. As much as that pains me to say.
We met back in the middle. We met back at home, Paul. We're back at home, so Pitt can be the common ground here.
Absolutely. Well, Hannah, so this is the People of Penn State podcast. I'm Paul Clifford. We're talking with Hannah Mears. She is a sports broadcaster. She works for the Pirates. She's a producer. She is doing everything to make a career now in the sports biz. Hannah, at the end of each program, we like to do what we call the lightning round. So let's do that if you're up for it.
For it. I'm ready.
All right. You alluded to this a little earlier, but your favorite class at Penn State?
It was easily Mike Portman's sports industry class. That's where it all started for me. So I have to always be a little biased towards that one.
If you could have dinner with anyone, who would it be and why?
This is a hard question. I never know how to answer this one. One dinner that I would love to have one day is to be able to have enough money and be financially ready, or have everyone over for a big cookout. Every person that's done something to help me along my way in my career, just so I could give a huge thank you to them, because I don't know how I'd ever be able to repay them. So I would say that's probably the answer. If there's any other people that are interesting to me right now, I would say Lisa Salters. She's a former Penn Stater. I have a lot of respect for her. Kay Adams is super fun. I'd love to pick her brain about making her own way in her career. Pat McAfee is hilarious, so I'd love to sit with him, or Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, just from the WWE phase of growing up and watching him and getting to see what he does now. So I would say those would be 4 people, but my main thing would be able to be the person who can host a dinner to give thanks to everybody.
That's awesome. Here, I'll give you a little insight, though. The way that you can repay all of those people who have done that for you is for you to do it for other people, right? That's the true way you pay your mentors back, is by being that for somebody else and paying it forward.
Definitely. I do. I try my best, Paul.
How about your most unusual "we are" moment? Either a place where you saw a Penn Stater and you yelled out "we are," or they recognized you as a Penn Stater because of the gear you were wearing and yelled it out to you.
That's so interesting. I think that's really hard. I would say, I don't know if I have like an unusual spot. I really haven't gone to many places since graduation. I've been pretty much here in Pittsburgh. But I would say, actually, just 2 weeks ago, covering the National Lacrosse Championships for Penn State, I was able to have a special bond going up to Coach and some of the players and saying I am a Penn Stater. And Coach was so excited that I was a Penn Stater and they were going to have a Penn Stater on their sidelines. And I think I was able to have opportunities to interview people after a loss, which is never easy. But because I was a Penn Stater and we had that bond. So I would say that's probably the coolest thing about that "we are" is truly people supporting everybody and like what the words behind that means. So I would say that's definitely, it's helped me a lot more than it's been unusual. You can use that a lot to your advantage.
Sure. We saw you on the sidelines for numerous Penn State sports. Which is your favorite?
Wrestling for sure. I think it's just because that's what I've grown up with. I know everyone's like, okay, Mears, say something different, but that's sort of the sport that's always had a special place in my heart. So Penn State wrestling for sure.
So how about your favorite sports moment that you had the opportunity to cover?
Oh gosh, that's always so hard. I'll say now, I think when I was in college, it was probably the Super Bowl because that's like the pinnacle of sports. But just recently, I would say my first time being on national TV for the Big Ten Network, I got to travel down to Auburn for the Big Ten SEC matchup and covered none other than Penn State and have my first ever national TV interviews with Sean Clifford and Coach Franklin. So I would say that's probably my favorite like sports moment so far.
And your favorite flavor of creamery ice cream?
Death by chocolate. Chocolate girl through and through. I think that was my flavor for sure when I'd go there.
Well, Hannah, we want to thank you for joining us on the People of Penn State podcast. You are doing some great things in your career, and by allowing us to share that with other Penn Staters helps to elevate the value of the Penn State degree, and for that, we're truly grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. We are
Penn State. I also want to thank Vincent Longaro. He is our producer behind the scenes for all the great work that he is doing. If you like this episode, I hope that you'll subscribe to the People of Penn State in your favorite podcast app of choice. And while you're there, go ahead and give us a rating, drop us a review, help us spread the word to fellow Penn Staters about these great stories that we are sharing. If you're a member of the Penn State Alumni Association, thank you for your support. And if you're not, what are you waiting for? Go to our website at alumni.psu.edu, and you too can become a member of the world's largest alumni association. Thanks again for listening in and for all you do for the university, for the glory, and for the future. We are